It began with the Villa de Pitanxo, North Atlantic, February 2022, a Spanish trawler in waters too cold to name. 43 men, boots crusted in ice, nets heavy with hake and exhaustion. The deck tilted once, slow, almost polite, then again, sharper. A cable snapped, a winch screamed. Freezing spray sealed the drains and locked the pumps in silence. 3 men surfaced in a life raft. 21 vanished into the black. The sea turned flat after that, as if smoothing its sheets. The report said loss of stability in icing conditions. The survivors said nothing. They just stared at the horizon, waiting for it to move. The current carried their story east to the Celtic Sea, where another name dissolved years before. Bugaled Brej, January 2004. Calm weather, no wind, no warning. 5 men hauling nets, a single call across the radio. We're going down, then static. 60 seconds from surface to silence. The wire came up sheared, as though bitten clean by something with precision and purpose. Submarines trained nearby that day, but no one admitted hearing the scream of metal underwater. The official line read, "Accidental snag," but fishermen still cut their engines there just to listen. Sometimes they swear they hear knocking from below, faint, rhythmic, mechanical, a heartbeat too deep for men. Far north, 2012, the Arctic Fox burned before it sank. A Russian crab boat working the Barents Sea, ice outside, diesel inside, and a spark that chose its moment well. The explosion began below deck, where oil fumes slept beneath the generators. When the fire rose, it didn't roar. It whispered through the vents, tasting paint, wood, lungs. A second blast shattered the radio room. The last transmission came through half a syllable. "We're burr," then silence, replaced by the hiss of flame-eating cables. Helicopters came hours later and found nothing but a single raft, scorched black and half inflated, drifting among ash flakes that used to be men. The report blamed wiring. The truth was habit, tired hands, old valves tied open to keep the deck lights running. Fire doesn't need weather, just timing. The next loss came in fog. Hokkaido waters, 2015. The Taiyo Maru number, 28 fished blind, radar coughing static. 2 vessels, 2 captains, both guessing at ghosts in the mist. One turned port, one held course. They met mid-sentence. Steel kissed steel. The bow of one opened the other like fruit. Flooding filled the lower cabins before anyone spoke a word. 9 men made it to a raft. 17 went under with their boots still laced. Diesel slick caught fire between the wrecks, a thin orange line across the grey. Maritime law called it poor visibility, but the logbooks later showed what the fog couldn't hide. Both ships had cut crew to save cost. 2 missing eyes on the bridge were all it took for the ocean to blink back. And then came heat again, this time from the Pacific. Philippines, 2019. The Don Juan II, purse signer with diesel drums stacked too close to dreams. They patched leaks with tape, tied ropes with hope, and slept beside fuel. At dawn, someone lit the stove in the galley. The blast turned morning to white. The deck tore open. Tin roofs from nearby huts shook from miles away. Fishermen along the coast saw a column of smoke and thought another island was burning. Bodies surfaced slowly, still clutching coffee mugs, pieces of rope, unspilled prayers. The cause, vapor ignition in a confined hold. Translation, neglect shaped like fire. 2007, the Bourbon Dolphin, a Norwegian anchor handling tug built to fight the North Sea. She wasn't fishing. She was helping a drilling rig stand its ground. Anchors the size of houses, tow lines thicker than wrists, tension so high it hummed. One bad angle, one shift in load. The line snapped her sideways, and physics did the rest. 30 degrees, 50, gone. 8 crew aboard. 7 bodies were found. The rest sank with the hum still in their ears. The phrase in the report, human error under excessive load, became a national apology in code. Norway rewrote its rules. The sea didn't bother. Somewhere south, the wind was busy with another ship, Saiwan 707, 2014, near the Kuril Islands. Late November, temperatures low enough to crack metal. A fire in the engine room, fed by oil residue and fatigue. Extinguishers were dry. Alarms worked once, then failed. The coordinates in the distress call were wrong by 40 miles. By the time anyone got there, all that remained was a burned lifeboat, upside down, drifting among fuel drums. 21 missing, presumed dead. Inspection records said the vessel had no deficiencies, but corrosion doesn't write letters, it just waits. And then, a story that tried to end twice. A longliner from Fiji, they called her Destiny, as if naming her could control her. 40 degrees south, the roaring 40s, wind that cuts through bone and memory alike. A hydraulic winch jammed mid-haul, a line snapped back with 200 pounds of steel and momentum. One man fell before he could shout. Panic took the deck faster than water. Rafts tied down for storage efficiency. Engines flooded, lights died, the sea climbed in slow and deliberate steps. No survivors. When they found the raft 2 days later, it was empty, half inflated, drifting under clouds that didn't know where to rain. Mechanical failure, they wrote, but it wasn't machinery. It was faith, the blind kind that believes tomorrow always comes. Back north again, Newfoundland waters, 2020. The Chief William Solis dragged for scallops through ice fog. 6 men aboard, deck glowing dull orange under floodlights. She was heavy, too heavy, with catch and with December. At 5 a.m., a wave came sideways, broad and quiet. The rudder jammed, the roll deepened, and the vessel didn't return. The beacon screamed for 6 hours before its batteries froze. When divers found her, she sat upright on the seabed, doors open, radio still tuned to channel 16. They called it a fatal combination of weather, load, and ice. The families called it winter. Even the old ones get tired. 1983, Marine Electric, off Virginia. A coal ship past its age, rust crawling under its paint. A nor'easter caught her in the dark. Waves taller than her bridge slammed until the hull cracked and the hatches buckled. The pumps couldn't keep up. At 4 a.m., the captain said the words no captain wants to own. Abandon ship. But the lifeboats couldn't launch. The tilt was too steep. Men jumped instead, landing in 30-foot seas that froze them before they could drown. 34 aboard. 3 lived. Their survival suits, the new regulation that followed, were stitched from the lesson of their skin. Sometimes reform is written in cold blood, and somewhere in between all of it, October 1991, Gloucester, Massachusetts, the Andrea Gale. Sword fishing trip. 6 men, one storm that had no name until later, the perfect storm. They went out chasing one more haul. 2 weather systems collided above them, and the ocean built walls. The last words from Captain Tyne, "She's coming on strong, boys." Then static. No wreckage, no bodies, just absence wide enough to chart. They said, "Lost with all hands." But fishermen in Gloucester still pour a shot of rum before they sail and whisper the same words. "Not today, Gale. Not today." In 1998, the FV Gaul vanished off Norway. No call, no flare, no hint of struggle, just gone. 36 men. They searched for a month and found nothing but one life buoy, clean, untorn, still floating upright. Years later, divers found the wreck on the seabed. Doors open, nets stowed, coffee mugs still on the mess table. A rogue wave, they said. But sailors called it something older, the hand that closes quick. The Gaul became shorthand for a kind of disappearance that feels intentional, like the sea had chosen its silence carefully. 5 years later, in 2003, another mystery rose from tropical heat instead of Arctic dark. The Madre de Dios, a Peruvian longliner, worked tuna runs off Ecuador. A crew of 24, mostly young men, 3 of them new to the ocean. At dawn, the first mate noticed a diesel slick around the stern. A fuel hose had burst. They should have shut down the engines. They didn't. One spark from a cigarette found the fumes and rewrote the sunrise. The explosion broke the vessel in 2. Half the crew were thrown clear. Half went under with the engine still turning. When the fire was gone, all that was left was a hull split like a mouth mid-scream. The report said ignition of vapor in confined space, but the families who saw the remains called it what it was, a wage too small to buy new hoses. 1,000 miles away, the Tullymore tried to outlast a cyclone off the coast of Western Australia. January 2012, 50-knot winds, rain thick enough to erase direction. She was small, a prawn trawler built for coastal runs, not open sea punishment. But the captain had debts, and debts don't respect weather warnings. The storm hit at midnight, a wall of wind against the aluminum hull. By dawn, the EPIRB signal blinked out, drowned by static. When searchers found her, the cabin roof was missing and her propeller still jammed with seaweed. No bodies, just 6 empty life jackets tangled together like seaweed prayer flags. One of the rescue divers said the silence down there felt heavier than the wreck itself. Not all storms are natural. In 2009, the Lu Rongyu 2682 left Shidao, China for the Indian Ocean, a distant water squid boat, 58 crew, mostly young men chasing wages abroad. Weeks into the voyage, the captain's rationing turned cruel, food withheld, water restricted, punishments public. One night, a deckhand fought back. attack. By morning, 10 men were dead. The survivors turned the ship toward home, but the mutiny didn't sail straight. When the authorities boarded near Qingdao, they found 19 bodies. Some killed, some starved, some just gone. There was no storm, no wave, no fire, just humanity, stripped bare by salt and isolation. The report called it disciplinary breakdown at sea. The newspapers called it murder. The ocean didn't bother naming it at all. 2015 brought another kind of tragedy. Quiet, bureaucratic, predictable. The Jupiter the Fond, a Ghanaian fishing carrier, overloaded with barrels of frozen catch, refrigeration units humming themselves to death. The chief engineer had warned of a coolant leak for months. No one listened. When the compressor seized mid-voyage, the heat inside the hold rose fast. Ammonia filled the lower decks. No flames, no drama, just air that turned invisible and fatal. Men collapsed where they stood, their lungs freezing from the inside out. By the time rescue arrived, the ship floated upright, engines still running, crew silent in their bunks. Investigators in port wore masks, journalists didn't. Half of them fainted from fumes while taking photos. Regulations tightened after that, on paper. But ammonia still waits in dark corners of ships that cost more to fix than to bury. And then, the story everyone wanted to forget. Harvester 2, 2021, off Alaska's Aleutian Chain. A 40-year-old vessel refitted to catch black cod. Too many pots, too few checks. She took on water slowly. Sneaky. A leak in the stern tube that no one noticed until the bilge alarms blinked red. The pump motors were old, corroded, electrical insulation frayed by salt. When they tried to start them, the circuit sparked. A small flame, then a roar. The captain hit the distress beacon, but the signal cut mid-burst. The fire burned through the radio wires first. She sank before the Coast Guard could lock on coordinates. All 7 aboard, presumed dead. 1 month later, wreckage washed ashore on Unalaska. Charred gloves, melted goggles. The captain's coffee thermos intact, lid still screwed tight. A reminder that even the things meant to keep heat in sometimes keep it out. But the ocean wasn't done with that year. Late 2021, the Xiangfu No. 8, a Taiwanese distant water trawler, radioed from the Central Pacific. "Engine trouble, drifting," the message said. Then nothing. By the time patrol planes arrived, the ship was found perfectly upright, idling in open water. No crew, no lifeboats missing, no signs of struggle. Only half-eaten meals still on the table, and a line of cigarettes burned down to filters. They called it the ghost ship of the equator. Authorities suspected poisoning, carbon monoxide, maybe foul play. No proof. The sea doesn't leave fingerprints, just erases them. Months later, when they towed her into port, one radio still worked, looping a single static burst every 10 seconds. No one could explain why. The next year, 2022, brought the Haiyang 501, a South Korean stern trawler near Antarctica. A wave hit from behind, taller than the mast, striking without warning. Rogue wave, one of those freak monsters that appear once in 10,000 storms. It rolled the ship bow down, slamming her stern first into the trough. 4 men thrown clear survived on floating net drums for 3 days before rescue. 30 others never surfaced. They said it sounded like thunder under the water, like the earth itself coughing. The phrase rogue wave sounds rare. It isn't. It's just the sea exhaling when it's tired of balance. March 2023, the Nandini, an Indian trawler near the Andaman coast, stayed to chase one last haul. Weather advisories screamed for port return. They stayed another hour, then another. The squall arrived sideways, slamming wind and rain hard enough to peel paint. The masts snapped. The anchor line fouled the propeller. The radio shorted. By the time the storm cleared, debris stretched across 10 kilometers. When locals found the bodies, they still wore rain gear zipped to the throat. No one ever found the captain's log. Some say he'd written, "We just need one more net." That line became a proverb among coastal crews. One more net is one too many. By 2024, automation began creeping into the fleets. Smart sonar, remote winches, satellite links. But even technology drowns the same way as men. The Argent Dawn, a British experimental trawler, ran unmanned off the coast of Scotland, remotely operated from shore. Her sensors malfunctioned mid-gale, autopilot looped, and she circled herself into disaster. The control feed went dark, replaced by static waves like breathing. When they found her weeks later, she floated upside down, lights still blinking beneath the water, the first fully autonomous vessel to capsize without ever carrying a soul. The report read, "Algorithmic navigation fault under dynamic load." But the headlines called it something simpler, "The ghost that sank itself." It proved a quiet point, that you can build machines to think like men, but you can't teach them fear. And so the sea continues its arithmetic. Each decade, another dozen names, another list of coordinates that vanish beneath next year's storms. You'd think we'd learn. We build better hulls, stronger radios, smarter engines, but the math never changes.